Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Unacademy, the one-stop destination for the civil services English medium aspirants. Welcome to the daily Hindu analysis. Before we move any further, please quickly let me know in the live chat box if I'm clearly audible and visible. Please write yes and allow me to resume. All right, everything looks good. An important announcement. On account of the festivities, we have launched a very important offer in the Shiksha Mahotsav, where you stand a chance to use this as a triple treat. In case you're preparing for 2027, we provide you a 12-month subscription free of cost. So you take a 12-month subscription, you get a 12-month subscription free of cost. That means the validity is extended. In case you do not make it in the prelim stage of the examination, you can also use 12 months of extended subscription under the Assure program. And therefore, we make sure that we are holding your hand till the end of your preparation. Please note that this offer ends today, that is 27th of September. Therefore, make good use of it. Another important announcement is that today we will be taking up monthly current affairs relating to environment and ecology. Mukesh sir will be live on this YouTube channel at 7 p.m. So therefore, tune in again at 7 p.m. to cover environment and ecology for August as well as September in a holistic manner. These are the topics that we will discuss, multiple topics, fewer editorials, but multiple small topics that are important from today's Delhi edition of the Hindu. Let's start with the first topic. Upgrading shipyards or upgrading the shipbuilding industry. Why is this important? This can be important from GS paper 3. In GS paper 3 economy, there are topics relating to infrastructure, and in that infrastructure, there can be questions relating to shipbuilding industry or shipyards of India. In fact, there has been a recent trend and a recent notification where the government of India has announced a very lucrative package, almost amounting to 69,000 crore to revitalize India's shipbuilding sector and enhance its status as a maritime hub for the coming years. In sync with this announcement of the package, it is also important to understand what are the problem areas when it comes to shipbuilding. What are the problem areas when it comes to the shipyards? Shipyards are basically the places where shipbuilding activity takes place. So the concerns and challenges are the focus of this editorial. We will not just limit ourselves to the concerns and challenges. We will understand why a focus on shipbuilding activity is the need of the hour and has significance for India beyond the limited scope of the industry. We will then do the concerns and challenges, and then we will also do certain solutions and cover this topic entirely. Let's dive into this topic. The need significance of focusing on shipbuilding and upgrading shipyard. The first and foremost significance is that till now, a lot of shipping vessels, for example, cargo vessels, for example, cruise, for example, fishing vessels, etc., are imported in India. And therefore, this import dependence leads to a huge amount of forex reserve that are wasted in these imports. So therefore, the first and foremost advantage is going to be reducing the vulnerability to the imports of these products and ensuring indigenous production, ensuring self-sufficiency in the production of these aspects. The second important aspect is whenever you're building a certain industry, you're not just building that particular industry. In fact, if we promote the shipbuilding industry, it is automatically going to create a demand for all the other sectors that are supplying raw materials to it. That means it can have a multiplier impact on the growth and economic development of the country. For instance, there can be demand for steel that goes into shipbuilding. There can be demand for engineering related skills that can go into shipbuilding. Demand for the welding industry, the engines, the pumps, etc. Those can also be the case. So therefore, we see that it is not just going to be limited for developing a particular sector. Rather, it can have a multiplier impact. It will also be very significant for job creation. Employment can be catered to using this as a strategic industry as well. Another major aspect is to pose India or strategically place India to become a maritime hub. Why is that important? Because India is at the crossroads. The strategic positioning of India with a very, very long coastline. The revised estimate suggests that the coastline is almost equivalent to 11,000 kilometers. Therefore, it is very important to note that India is at the crossroads of multiple shipping corridors. The shipping corridors from Arabian Sea, the Indian Ocean region, to the Andaman Sea, and then going to the Malacca state into the eastern countries, the ASEAN bloc, etc. So therefore, this strategic placement of India makes it absolutely important to basically dominate the Indian Ocean region, to become an indispensable force for the Indian Ocean region. And therefore, this can only happen when we develop certain ports, certain shipyards, shipbuilding facilities, and therefore allow for easy repair solutions even for ships that are halting in India. Those are the kind of facilities that we must be providing. So the idea is to ensure that shipbuilding is encouraged in India so that we can use maritime commerce. A lot of land commerce is often considered as expensive, while maritime commerce is considered as cheaper alternative to the land connectivity. So maritime shipping routes can be utilized, and we can also ensure easier exports. That means better the shipbuilding that we have, better shipyards that are creating big cargoes that can take huge amount of cargo at one time, can lead to better logistics. In fact, till now, India is criticized when it comes to the exports. The time taken for one export or a ship to leave one of the ports in India is often a lot. There are bureaucratic delays, there are hurdles, there are multiple licenses, permit requirements that have to be sought. Therefore, we have to ensure that those are also made more efficient. We of course have to ensure the exports are made faster, but the exports also need diversification. That means when we talk about shipbuilding industry in the country, is it only the ships relating to the ships that are cargo vessels? Cargo vessels or cargo ships are basically carrying raw material, bulk produce, for instance, coal, for example, raw material to maybe European countries, Western countries, etc. But there are also other ships that India should focus on. That means right now, majority of our focus is associated with the demand created by what the government needs. For example, the government needs strategic naval warfare related vessels, submarines, certain vessels, certain torpedoes, etc. So excessive demand and focus is created by the government, but the demand also has to be created by other aspects in the domestic economy, and also the export of ships to other countries is also very important. So therefore, we must diversify. We must not limit ourselves. Of course, naval ships and autonomy, strategic autonomy is very important for creating naval ships, which has become another area of warfare, the naval, the seas. But it is also important to create, for instance, very appropriate fishing vessels that can be used to enhance livelihood. It is also very important to create inland vessels that can be used to utilize the inland waterways for quick commerce and for quick deliveries, other than cargoes and passenger fleets. So ship diversification becomes a very important need for the time. What we also need is technological advancement. That means the way shipping is happening or the way any transportation is happening is truly transforming. Why? Because of the challenges of climate change and global warming, we have to decarbonize the transport sector, and that applies to the shipping sector as well. We need to ensure that green shipping is the future. Shipping based on LNG supplies and not on what is called as crude petroleum, oil or coal. That should be the cleaner and greener future we are aspiring for. Shipbuilding activity or shipyards that are very important, and creating prominent ships are very important for India's even foreign security vision. Under the foreign security vision and the Sagar Doctrine is to provide peace and stability and security for all in the Indian Ocean region. In order to realize this dream, we have to ensure that our ships are up to date. The shipyards, the manufacturing places creating these ships are also having very good and big capacities, and also our ports are very adept to ensuring good docking facilities and easier and shorter turnaround times as well. So this becomes the need and significance of shipbuilding and upgrading the shipyards. What are the concerns and issues? Most of these concerns are discussed in the editorial. So let's dive into that. The first and foremost concern is any kind of shipbuilding activity or reinventing or modernizing the shipyards. Those are the areas in which ships are manufactured, they are built. Any kind of modernization of either shipyards or ships takes a huge amount of initial capital that is required. So high upfront capital requirement deters the entry of private sector players who might not have the initial capital to invest. There is excessive focus and dependence on the government sector in order to cater to this problem. So high upfront cost and capital investment becomes a major issue, which is why we see when we talk about India's trends, India is known for creating ships of a smaller capacity versus when we see the other players in the shipbuilding market, for instance, Korea, for example, Japan, as well as China. They are creating ships that have a huge tonnage capacity that can carry huge amount of cargo at once. Therefore, it is important for India to shift from not just small capacity ships to in fact large vessels and big carriers as well. And that cannot happen till the time the upfront capital cost related concern is not addressed. The second concern is even if the private players can get the amount that is required, shipbuilding activity is still a long gestation project. It cannot happen in 2 weeks, it cannot happen in 3 months, it cannot happen in 6 months. Sometimes it takes years. In fact, in India, to create large ships, it is taking almost for 2 to 3 years. So what we need is not just finance, but what we need is long-term finance for long gestation projects. And that is also a limited issue. Another issue is competition with already established players in the market. For instance, countries like Japan, China, etc. They utilize a very important technological way to create large ships. What they do is they do not create large ships from scratch. In fact, they make what are called as parts of big ships, and those prefabricated. Fabrication means creating something, manufacturing something. So these are prefabricated parts of a ship. Those parts are carried using cranes to the shipyard, and those parts are assembled together after bringing them together. So therefore, this kind of technology of prefabricating parts outside separately and coming together and leading to the assembly of big ships is a technology that India has not still mastered. Why is that the case? Because if you want to test these parts, if you want to assemble these parts, sometimes what you require is the presence of floating water. But you do not want to try it in the seas. You want to try it in a limited space where water can be accumulated. Why? Because if there is a problem when the part or the ship is assembled at sea, you cannot drain off the water to basically work at the bottom of the ship. But in these limited enclosure type ports, you can sometimes drain the water. It is almost like a bathtub in which water can be drained. And again, if there are any issues to fix, any issues to supply, even at the bottom of the ship, that can be maneuvered, that can be checked. And that is why these limited enclosures of water are called as dry docks. These dry docks in shipyards are something that are very important if you are using the technology of prefabrication, getting them together, assigning it together and seeing if the ship floats absolutely well or not. Even after it floats, the water can be dried because it is in an enclosure. It is not directly in the sea, and this can help in ensuring proper assembly, retrofitting, checking again and again, and making sure the product is final. This kind of a technology India has not mastered even till today. Why is that the case? Because these dry docks have to be absolutely long in nature. They have to be elongated. They have to have a lot of space in order for this assembly line to happen. India does not have these long dry docks and these long shipyards when we see the present shipyards condition. And therefore, this is something that India worries. And because of these limitations, India is predominantly focusing on creating ships, but ships of a smaller size, not the large size vessels. Indian shipyard lacks long yards, as we had already discussed, large cranes and prefabrication facility. Prefabrication means you made the unit separately, you have assembled it after making it. In fact, according to when we see the time taken for creating a big and a large vessel, globally, for instance, in Japan and China, the estimated time from first putting the steel frame to ensuring sea trials only takes about 1 year. But the time taken in India is an average of 2 to 3 years for a large vessel. And that is why there is a huge gap when it comes to the performance of two industries and the efficiency and productivity of the two sectors. Another major issue is the weak ancillary support. What do you mean by ancillary sectors? Ancillary sectors are those sectors that provide raw materials to the predominant sector. They provide some form of parts, some form of raw material, and without those ancillary sectors being developed, the final sector will never be truly developed. And that is also a problem when it comes to India. That means India has a very fragmented approach. There are multiple things that are required, for example, navigation systems, pumps, steel industries, engines, etc. These sectors are not fully developed in India to support the shipbuilding sector. Even if they are developed, they are disaggregated. That means dispersed all across the length and breadth of the country. Like how you have industrial sectors, one sector in which all the services, all the supply chains, all the raw material are integrated. The shipbuilding industry does not have this integrated supply chain where all the ancillary sectors are in a limited distance. And therefore, this kind of a disaggregated industry setup creates a lot of problems, delays, and bottlenecks. So the supply chain is absolutely dispersed. It is broken, and the supply chain is not resilient, not smooth, providing for support to the mother industry. There is also shortage. That means in a country like India, for example, a developing country like India, there is no dearth of labor to do the job. But is there a dearth of skilled manpower that can think about heavy engineering designs, that can think about marine engineering, that can provide certain innovative solutions, for example, for welding solutions, for packaging solutions, for assembly line solutions? Absolutely yes. That manpower we still do not have. We do not have proper dedicated training institutes that are producing this skilled manpower. Whatever skilled manpower we had, a lot of them people in the STEM fields had moved out of the country in the 1990s, in 2000s, etc. And therefore, in this niche sector, that is marine engineering, that is shipbuilding, the skilled manpower is still a problem and a scarcity when it comes to India. We also have a problem relating to the demand creation. That means shipbuilding or ships, the demand for ships can go up and down according to the trade that is happening in the world. So if the trade is high, the demand is higher. If one country is giving a lucrative offer, the demand suddenly shifts and the contracts are given to that one country. Yes, there are also cases of uncertainties of change in government's policy. Government contracts also, if given to private sectors, are often changed in 2 years, in 1 year. And therefore, the contracts are not for a very, very long time. So these kind of uncertainties in the geopolitical domain, in demand, and because of the competition of other countries, creates a problem for the private sector in India to truly invest in shipbuilding and also reforming the shipyards. Another major issue is relating to the innovative potential. Now, any kind of new technology, for instance, if you are creating ships, any kind of vessel that is working on, for example, hydrogen as a power source, that is working maybe on LNG as a power source, that requires a lot of research and development on how the engine is going to be performing, how the fuel is going to be used, and what are the problems associated with it. Even if we have the skilled force, that they are working in conventional sectors. Conventional centers means the same ones in order to just build and release the ship. But we are not working in tomorrow's technology that will be the need in the future. For instance, green shipping, that is not being developed or focused on too much. What we also have, that means when we need fuel supply, for example, crude oil, for example, coal, etc., there are often short contracts, which does not give the confidence to the shipping industry to invest further and further in the industry. For example, coal contracts should be about 1 year, for at least 2 years, for at least 3 years, in order to ensure that the industry is feeling secure about a ready supply of fuel. Those are also hampering the confidence in the industry. Now, when we come to solutions, the few solutions that we can mention are, first and foremost, of course, the shipbuilding industry has also been given the infrastructure status. What do you mean by infrastructural status given by the government? The infrastructural status given by the government makes it very easy for that industry to get loans, almost interest-less loans, or loans with a very favorable long repayment obligation. So this infra status can make at least the capital requirement a better option. The second aspect that we will have to write is how we have industrial corridors where multiple raw materials, services, everything that an industry needs is in the next mile distance. That is something that we will have to replicate even for shipbuilding corridors. Shipyards should be linked to ports. Shipyards should be linked to ancillary sectors, and therefore there should be easy hinterland connectivity as well. So integrated shipbuilding corridors should be the case to go. Adoption of prefabrication technique, the example that we had seen, that enhances the efficiency, the way in which we can create much bigger vessels, that is by prefabricating them, making the parts separately and then assembling the parts using dry docks. Dry docks or long assembly yards are the need. Why? Because these are going to enhance the making or the possibility of making larger vessels in India. We also need proper institutes. That means skill development programs are also important. Skill development in what? In specifically marine engineering, etc. In case we need to collaborate with other countries or other R&D institution, we should not shy away from this. So therefore, skill development at home domestically and collaboration, and therefore an exchange of research, development and best practices can be the case when it comes to this industry. Last but not the least, in order to ensure and sustain the demand for this industry, PSU contracts, the government contracts for demands, should be elongated. That means they should be for a good time period, not short contracts, so as to give the security and assurance to the industry. So that is something that we will write as solutions. You can take a practice question based on this discussion. Despite India's long coastline, that means almost an 11,000 coastline, growing trade needs, we are trading, the exports are increasing, will only increase in the years to come. The shipbuilding industry faces multiple hurdles. Identify the key challenges of the sector and suggest suitable remedies, the suitable solutions that we should be using. Now, the introduction can be about the potential of using or placing India as a maritime hub. A maritime hub, why? A, because of its positioning, the strategic position in the Indian Ocean region. Second is because of the doctrine of Sagar, security for all in the region. Third is relating to the ease in exports. That means better shipbuilding allowing for better exports, right? So these will be the idea that you will write. In terms of data, you can also mention how India's coastline is absolutely big. That means almost 11,000 kilometer worth of coastline. That is the revised estimate. Earlier it was 7,500, right? After talking about this, you can talk about the small significance. You can just mention the small significance of investing in this. And in this significance, you can talk about the exports, you can talk about diversification, you can also talk about the multiplier impact, for example, in ancillary services. Then go on to write the challenges in points format, and then go on to write the solutions in points format. That is all that you need to do when attempting this question. Let's come to another editorial. Trump slaps tariffs on drugs, trucks, and furniture. We will club two articles. There is another article on immediate impact of US tariff on the pharma exports from India. So we will club these two articles and understand what are the developments. Now, the Trump administration has continued the saga of imposing tariffs, and in that saga, the Trump administration has mentioned recently that there will be new set of tariffs. In fact, 100% import duties will be applied on branded drugs. 100% import duties will be applied on branded drugs. 25% of import duties will be applied on heavy duty trucks. 30 to 35% tariffs will also apply on household items. For example, kitchen cabinets, bathroom cabinets, upholstered furniture, etc., etc. So these are the three areas in which new tariffs have been declared by the Trump administration recently. But for us, India's focus has to be on this sector. Why is that the case? Because India has posed itself to become one of the biggest pharmaceutical country, producing huge amount of pharmaceutical drugs. The pharmaceutical industry in the country is booming. In fact, we have a huge market share in the world exports also when it comes to the pharmaceutical exports. In fact, 30% of all the exports, almost one third, 30% of all the exports of all the pharmaceutical drugs from India are in fact going to United States of America. One third of our pharmaceutical exports. So will this hurt India's pharmaceutical sector? This is something that we will dive. The Trump administration also made it clear that this 100% tariff will apply to any branded pharmaceutical drug that is entering the United States of America, unless the pharmaceutical company has started a manufacturing unit in the United States itself. So therefore, there are certain caveats, there are certain requirements that if you have a manufacturing unit in United States, then these tariffs will not be applicable to you. But if you do not, if you're only exporting this to United States of America, then it will be applicable to you. So in this context, let's understand what is the difference between the two. The difference between the two is that we have a difference between what are branded drugs and what are generic drugs. That is important to understand the impact on India. Now, branded drugs basically means the drugs that are made by the original company, the original drugs, the drugs when made in the first time, made by the companies that had done research on it, that had developed it, that had done testing of the drugs, and therefore had marketed the drug also under their brand name. Those are called branded drugs. So original drugs, drugs made for the first time by companies who were first to develop them, are called branded drugs. Because the company is spending huge amount of money for innovation, research and development, testing of what the side effects are going to be, etc. All this takes a very long time. And therefore, the company files a patent. The patent is available with the company for a limited time. That means it cannot be for lifelong. And therefore, with the patent, they are selling the drug at a costly price. Why? Because this is the amount of expenses incurred by the company making the drug. And therefore, branded drugs are considered costlier. Example being, you would have heard about a particular drug called crocin, a medicine called crocin that we often take, crocin advanced that we often take in case we have fever. Look at generic drugs. Generic drugs are basically nothing but the copies of branded drugs. The active pharmaceutical ingredients remain the same. The composition remains the same. the safety remains the same, the dosage remains the same, and the impact on a person remains the same. Everything remains the same, but these are just copies of branded drugs. How are they copies? After the patent of the branded drug is over, after the patent expires, any pharmaceutical company is therefore allowed to make copies of these branded drugs. Of course, they cannot sell it in the brand name, they have to sell it in a generic form. And therefore, why are they cheaper? They are cheaper because in order to make copies of these drugs, the company did not have to do R&D, the companies did not have to do the testing facilities, they did not have to do the other procedures required to create a new formulation. They just had to emulate and copy the same formulation. And that is why it was quicker and it can be sold at a cheaper price. The same example being paracetamol. So basic paracetamol without a brand name, where it just says paracetamol 500 mg that is sold in the market, is a generic drug, right? The crocin also has the same active pharmaceutical ingredient, that is paracetamol, but it is just sold in the brand name under crocin or crocin advance. Both have the same efficacy, both have the same results. Now, why is this distinction important? This distinction is important because of one aspect, that yes, India's exports have been rising in the pharmaceutical industry. For instance, India's pharmaceutical exports have seen a 9.4% increase year by year. In fact, pharmaceutical exports to the US had increased more than 20% from about $8.7 billion in the financial year of 2024 to $10.51 billion in the financial year of 2025. So a 20%, almost a 20% increase of India's pharma exports to USA basically showcases how much of India's exports were entering the US markets. And therefore, it is a significant export product for India. But it is also important to note that the pharmaceutical export body, a pharmaceutical export body, when asked about what will be the impact of these new tariffs on the pharmaceutical sector, basically said, so India's exporters body called Pharmexil, an important body, Pharmexil, that is representing the industry, they said that we do not anticipate that there's going to be any immediate impact of these tariffs on India's exports to the US. Why is that the case? Because Pharmexil said that these tariffs are on branded drugs, on branded pharmaceutical drugs. They will be charged at 100% of customs duty or import duty. But most of India's export to US, the majority of what constitutes India's export to US is in fact the generic drugs. Those are non-branded drugs and the generic drugs. That is why we need to make a distinction. Are we exporting pharmaceutical products to USA? Yes. But it is not applicable on all pharmaceutical products, the new tariffs. We also have to see what comprises of our majority products in the exports that we are sending to USA. So majority of them are going to be generic drugs that we right now sell to USA markets. And therefore, there is not going to be a major impact on India per se because of a 100% tariff on branded drugs. Because branded drug is not India's strongest suit. We are not selling or exporting huge amount of branded drugs. Is this absolutely understood in the live chat? Please write yes and respond as well. Yes? Okay. So therefore we say, as bulk of our contribution, read this line along with me, as bulk of our contribution lies in simple generics, not branded drugs. Therefore, most large Indian companies already operate, and also a lot of companies, large Indian pharmaceutical companies, already operate some form of manufacturing facility in the US and also repackaging units in the US as well. So we are exporting generic drugs. Certain big pharmaceutical companies already have a small manufacturing unit in the US, and therefore the shock is not going to be too much on India's pharmaceutical sector. In fact, the body representing the sector also said that because of these tariffs on branded drugs are set to become more expensive for the common consumer in USA, and that might increase the attractive potential for generic drugs. Because branded drugs are getting more expensive, the demand for generic drugs can become even more, and that can also be a possibility. Read this line along with me. Domestic generic producers could see near-term gains as higher prices for branded drugs push demands for better cost-effective solutions. That's all that you need to know from these updates. Let's come to another article. Recall Chardham project judgment. Ex-minister, multiple former ministers, environmentalists, they petitioned the Supreme Court. So multiple former ministers, environmentalists have petitioned the Supreme Court. They have petitioned the Supreme Court for what? Now this can be used in GS paper 3 environment. Any question on environment, the problems relating to environment impact assessment, environmental degradation, fragile ecosystems, etc. You can use this particular case study. This can also be used for GS paper 4, where often case studies are created on the dilemma and the conflict between environmental conservation and development needs, environmental conservation and national defense strategic needs. So this can also be a case study about A versus B and how to balance the two demands. So let's understand the update in this context. Multiple environmentalists as well as former ministers have appealed to the Supreme Court that you must revisit a 2021 judgment. So there is a need or there is a demand for revisiting the 2021 judgment. What was the judgment? The judgment was basically associated with ensuring, so the government wanted to, let's understand the perspective, the government wanted to widen the roads in the mountainous regions of Uttarakhand and other mountainous states as well. So the government wanted to broaden the roads, expand the roads in the mountainous regions. Why is that the case? Because these roads were used for multiple purposes. One of this was for tourism purposes, that is the Chardham Yatra, Badrinath, Kedarnath, Yamunotri, Gangotri, those would be the Chardham Yatras. So therefore so that better tourism can reach these areas. Another reason why this road expansion in the mountainous regions was required and demanded by the government is to ensure defense needs or troops movement is absolutely facilitated. So for defense and national security purposes, this was also required. Therefore, the government basically said that allow us to broaden the roads. Multiple environmental activists had petitioned in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court created an important committee to look into this matter. Therefore, this committee was an expert committee set up by the Supreme Court. The government had demanded that allow us to create and open roads almost up to 10 meters, while 10 meter wide. While the Supreme Court expert committee said 10 meter is a lot of destruction to the fragile ecosystem, what we will permit is only a 5.5 meter wide road that is permissible in these fragile ecosystems. And therefore, the 5.5 meter limit was set. Again, the Defense Ministry had petitioned and multiple developments had happened. The Defense Ministry had said that this is not just a matter of normal development. This is a matter of national security. Because of multiple instances, for example, Chinese standoff in the Doklam region, in the Galwan region, and Chinese mobilization of infrastructure in the bordering areas next to India, there was a need felt that we also mobilize our troops in those regions. We create infrastructure that allows for quick movement of troops, supplies and defense supplies to those regions. There were a case relating to matching China's infrastructure build-up in these border areas, the tense areas, the Excision area, Doklam areas, etc. So therefore, petition was filed by the government in order to challenge this 5.5 meter limit that was put by the Supreme Court. And therefore, by quoting these concerns relating to national security, defense needs, etc., the government had said military equipment, the cargoes and the trucks carrying military equipment, troops, etc., they require wider roads, bigger roads. And therefore, with the presence and the activities of China, this is an inevitable demand. And therefore, the bench led by a former Chief Justice of India, Justice Chandrachud, upheld the government's demand, gave in to the government's demand and said, okay, we will allow for 3 prominent Himalayan highways to be considered, or those can be made into 10-meter wide roads. Why? For defense purposes. So not all roads will be permitted, but 3 prominent Himalayan highway roads connecting strategic points will now be able to be converted into 10-meter width as well. So a 10-meter width of the 3 national highway was accepted, which was the demand of the Defense Ministry. But now again, multiple environmentalists have been saying, look at the state of the mountainous ecosystem. Look at how the hill slopes are falling in the form of landslides. Look at how deforestation is not holding the soil, leading to the excessive flow of water, where the debris of construction, the debris of road damping is also coming in. When you cut the mountains, you are reducing the stability of the mountains. You are reducing the stability of the soil, and therefore you are disrupting these ecological regions. We've seen multiple instances of cloudburst, torrential rain, landslides, etc., causing huge destruction in the mountainous region. And therefore, environmentalists say that if we continue to go ahead with this kind of development that is not in sync with the fragile ecosystem, these instances will only worsen in the times to come. And therefore, they are saying that the Supreme Court must revisit and review the previous judgment, and therefore we should see that this kind of a 10-meter width and even sometimes the 5.5 meter width will be a dangerous precedent for the coming years. Therefore, you can use this as a case study or as a case study between environmental conservation, between interests of national security on the one hand, strategic advantage that we have in order to build infrastructure near the bordering areas for quick troop movement, supplies movement, etc., for tourism and cultural considerations, etc. So it is A versus B. One, it is a fragile ecosystem. There are multiple instances of cloudburst, deforestation, degradation, mud flows, debris accumulation, etc. in one side. But on the other hand, we also have very specific needs. For instance, in order to counter Chinese presence in the Doklam Galwan regions, to ensure quick ready supply if we are threatened at any time, and in order to ensure strategic presence very close to the national borders, to the international borders. So this becomes A versus B, something that you can remember. Let's come to another very quick article. Cannot completely ban, need balanced approach on firecrackers, says Supreme Court. Now, this can also be used for GS paper 3, the environment aspect. As you would know, the Delhi NCR region in the month of October, in the month of November, with the winter session setting in, the winter season setting in, there is a major problem relating to pollution. There is a lot of pollution or polluted air with particulate matter 2.5, 2.10 that is settling in the Delhi NCR region. And this polluted air only worsens with the crackers during the Diwali season that also come in sync with this winter season. So first it is the Diwali season along with winter. Now winter is associated with slow wind, and the wind does not really take away the polluted particles. Winter is also associated with dry conditions, and in dry conditions, the particles do not get saturated, hydrated, and fall down on the ground. That means in dry conditions, these particles remain suspended in the air and continue to create hazy, foggy, and polluted scenes. In fact, you would have seen multiple schools have had to be closed in winter seasons in the Delhi NCR region, because it is not safe for children to breathe that kind of air, right? The graded response action plan related measures are often kicked in the winter seasons. For instance, truck entries are banned. For instance, certain cars beyond a certain age are not permissible in the NCR region, etc. So therefore, there are multiple aspects that we are taking up to contain the NCR region related pollution. In fact, in January or later, even right now, by the month of November, it also coincides with what is called as stubble burning. So stubble burning from areas around Punjab, Haryana, etc. They also further contribute to the polluted air that moves into the NCR regions and settle and creates almost a blanket over the NCR region. So therefore, in these contexts, what we needed is that we contain the amount of crackers that we burn in the Diwali season. In case we are also burning crackers, at least they should be green crackers, not polluting the environment. And therefore, the Supreme Court said that we cannot completely ban the crackers. Why is that the case? Any kind of banning of an industry leads to the industry going into the black marketing. That means, for instance, that also happens with liquor sales. Those states in which there is prohibition, there will be black marketing of liquor, black marketing of alcohol that will continue. And therefore, that is even more dangerous because it is not regulated. At least when you allow for an industry to continue, you can put regulations, you can put checks, and you can put stringent safeguards. The moment the industry becomes a black market, regulation becomes a very difficult task. And therefore, the Supreme Court said that we must also ensure that there is a balance between livelihood. Whose livelihood? The livelihood of those individuals that are working in the firecracker industry. The Supreme Court also said that it is important to ensure that it stays on as an industry. There is not a blanket ban to ensure that it is not run by mafias. It is not turned into a black market, because this will ensure very less regulation, very less stringent safeguards. The Supreme Court also said that we need to take a holistic solution. That means the individuals or manufacturers, those manufacturers who have a certain license, they can manufacture green crackers. But there is a problem. Even if you ban crackers in the NCR region, there is a problem that most crackers from other regions will enter the NCR region because of the demand. And therefore, the Supreme Court said that if we want to take up this kind of an approach, then we will have to take it up in the entire country. Regional specific approach only in limited pockets when it comes to India, where the transportation of goods and services is absolutely easy, it will lead to not the right solution. That means we need to take an entire country approach and not just a limited approach in case we take it. So therefore, the Supreme Court, on the pleas that have been the petitions that have been filed, and said that we will not do a blanket ban. In fact, we will allow for proper regulation. We will also ensure that those who are permitted to produce green crackers, that means green crackers do not lead to pollution. The byproduct is not smoke, pollution, etc. These manufacturers will also be subjected to proper safeguards. What kind of safeguards? They need to take a certificate from the National Environment Engineering Research Institution and the Petroleum and Explosives Safety Organization. Only those manufacturing facilities who have this certificate will be allowed to produce green crackers to ensure safeguards. So again, this is also an example of livelihood, the inability to effectively create a ban versus environmental conservation. This is also a clash between what are called as cultural necessities, the cultural aspects that means associated with the festival of Diwali versus environmental conservation. How certain traditions, rituals and festivals can have an impact on environment. Let's come to another article. New farming technology holds potential to stop desertification. Now, what is this about? The Central University of Rajasthan, along with Krishi Vigyan Kendras that provide extension services, research and development, etc., along with the department, the horticultural department of the state of Rajasthan, they took up a very important experiment. And that experiment was growing wheat, the wheat crop that requires very good soil conditions, very good appropriate cold conditions. They took up this experiment of growing the wheat crop in a desert land, a land that was absolutely infertile, a land that was absolutely degraded. So the first ever wheat crop was grown on desert land in a village in Rajasthan's Ajmer district by the Central University of Rajasthan. You can use this article for GS paper 1 relating to problems relating to adaptation to climate change. Desertification is often a question. You can also use it for GS paper 3 agriculture, talking about climate resilient agriculture or ensuring soil fertility problem is therefore restored. How was this done? Let's understand. So what is desertification? Desertification simply means that till today or till very recently, a land was fertile. What do you mean by fertile? It was allowing for the growing of plants, crops, and therefore was productive in nature. It was supporting the growth of crops on that particular surface. And slowly, because of deforestation, because of overgrazing, because of soil erosion, because of nutrient depletion, that means by using the same kind of monocropping, one crop after the other, not leaving it fallow, only one crop depleting all the nutrients associated with the one crop that it takes. So all these aspects were leading to the fertile land turning into what is called as a dry land, not retaining its moisture, becoming barren and becoming infertile or unproductive. That means land that no longer can sustain any growth of crops or agriculture on its surface. So these are the multiple causes that were creating deforestation, and therefore we were seeing that areas adjoining certain deserts, for example, the areas of Rajasthan, Gujarat adjoining the Thar deserts, we saw that degraded land was increasing in the areas around it. For instance, the Aravallis, it is shifting towards the Aravalli, and Thar desert is almost seeming like it is expanding in the regions of Rajasthan, and therefore leading to barren land, therefore leading to land wastage. That means even though we have the land on paper, but that land is unproductive, it cannot basically grow any kind of crops. Therefore, the experiment that was taken up by the university along with the Krishi Vigyan Kendras is called solidification. Now, solidification basically meant that they are restoring. Solidification is the process of changing the quality of the soil. Solidification is about changing the compactness of the soil. Solidification is about changing the nutrients of the soil and restoring any degraded barren land, restoring the fertility of it back to its original state. So restoring degraded land and into the fertile soil again is the process of solidification. Changes in quality, changes in texture, changes in aeration, changes in compactness, and changes in the nutrient quality of the soil, to ensure that so much is changed that it also now again supports any kind of crop growing. How was this done? This was done by the application of a solution, of a prepared solution called bioformulation. A formulation was prepared. Bioformulation means, bio means any kind of life. So bioformulation means any kind of preparation of a solution that involves also the presence of certain microbes. For instance, you would have heard about the essential bacteria called Rhizobium, Acetobacter, etc. that is capable of fixing the nitrogen in the soil, that is capable of breaking down certain nutrients into more soluble forms that can be taken up by the crops easily. They also till the soil in a certain way by the movements. The microbes move in the soil as well and therefore aerate the soil as well. They are also known for reducing any harmful salts. They break down harmful salts, etc. That means this microbacteria or fungus has the ability of fixing the soil, retaining and getting back its nutrient capabilities. So soilification technology was basically used by applying bioformulation. Bioformulation means a preparation containing beneficial microbes, for instance bacteria, to fix the nitrogen, to make the soil, the nutrients more soluble, and therefore allowing for any kind of crops to grow. So this became one of the best ways. You can use this as an example when you are saying how to counter desertification and how to make degraded land into a better useful produce. So therefore, with bioformulation, what happens? The team had enhanced water retention. The water retention of the sandy soil could be enhanced. The quality of the soil had changed. It promotes cross-linking of sand particles. That means in sandy soil, there is very fluid. That means sand particles are disaggregated. They're not compact. They're not holding the water together. But this promoted the cross-linking of sand particles to improve the soil texture and the soil structure, stimulating beneficial microbial activity that also boosted the crop's stress resistance. So therefore, just use solidification as a technique and bioformulation as a technique to counter desertification and changing degraded lands into fertile lands again. Let's come to another article, giving warriors fighting chance. Now this is just important from the social justice point of view. This is just important from the ethical compassion shown to everyone point of view. This can just be used as an example. Let me tell you how to use it. For example, in 2020, a new center was started. The center was called National Center for Divyang Empowerment, the NCDE, National Center for Divyang Empowerment. This facility was basically catering to those paramilitary professionals who have lost some of their limbs or have faced certain form of disability while at service, while on the line of duty. So this facility is for training the CAPF personnel, the Central Armed Police Forces, the Central Reserve Police Forces personnel who suffer any kind of injuries. Sometimes there are explosive devices in the Maoist areas that leads to them losing a limb and therefore any form of disability. So even if they become physically challenged in the line of duty, they will be rehabilitated at these centers, given new skills, allowed to play a sports, and we will be using them. We will be using them also as individuals that can go and represent India in Paralympics. So that becomes a very important aspect. The example, National Center for Divyang Empowerment. Look at this now. The CRPF is the main force deployed in anti-Maoist operations. Yes, and these operations, multiple personnel have lost their limbs in multiple explosions in the left-wing affected areas. Based on their interests, whatever they like to do, this center, National Center for Divyang Empowerment, allows them to choose what they want to be rehabilitated in. Some of them are trained for sports. Some of them are also given desk-related jobs. That means they are not futile anymore for the state. The state continues to give them some livelihood opportunity, a dignified livelihood opportunity. So they can be used in intelligence gathering roles. They can be used as clerical or desk jobs, and this rehabilitation is provided by this center. It caters to the rehabilitation of these personnel who are injured while fighting left-wing extremists, Maoists, terrorists, etc. And this becomes a beautiful example of compassion that you can give as well. Let's come to another article. Now, this is important just for an update when it comes to GS Paper 3 Internal Security or update for prelims as well. The MiG-21, those are the important supersonic fighter jets that have been part of India's squadron till today. We have utilized them multiple times, for instance, in the 1965, 1971 wars and even in the Kargil conflict. We have used it, and this is also, according to the defense minister, a testimony of India and Russian relationships. They are designed by the Soviet Union, the USSR and Russia, as we call it now. These are single engines, and now the final one is also retiring. It is basically going to be off service, and therefore after serving for almost 6 decades, the MiG-21 are set to retire. These will now be replaced later, maybe by the light combat aircraft, that is the Tejas versions, and we are also set to develop the advanced medium combat aircrafts as well. So this is just the update that you need to know. There were, of course, multiple instances where the safety of the MiG-21 aircrafts was also debated. There were multiple crashes, we had lost multiple pilots, and therefore they were also known as flying coffins, unpopularly also known as flying coffins. So maybe the time was right to probably say a goodbye to them. Let's come to another article. Again, an article used for means value addition. Beautiful article. Whenever you are writing means value addition, you can pick up important success stories, or you can pick up important best practices relating to civil society organizations, government best practices in the social domain, etc., etc. So therefore, presently, the Hindu Businessline Changemakers Awards were presented to multiple people for ensuring a change in people's day-to-day lives or in other sectors. These will be very, very short means enrichment points. For instance, the social transformation change, the award for social transformation went to a NGO called Impulse, which is basically associated with rehabilitating trafficked victims, for instance, trafficked women and children from the rat hole affected mining areas of Meghalaya. That is all that you need to know as an example. NGO Impulse associated with rehabilitation of trafficked victims from Meghalaya. Digital Transformation Award went to Bhashini, Bhasha. That means Bhashini. It is a government project aimed to ensure that people get knowledge in any vernacular language that they need. And therefore, Bhashini, a government project, is ensuring the translation of languages on the platform and ensuring artificial intelligence is used for creating these easy translations for people in vernacular languages. The Young Changemakers Award went to Kalyani Shinde. Kalyani Shinde developed what is called as India's first Internet of Things. Internet of Things means automated. The sensors can give a command to the final center about changing the temperature of a region. So Internet of Things based onion storage solution device. This can be a great example for agri-tech. So first Internet of Things based onion storage solution device that monitors the microclimate, the temperature, the humidity, etc., at which the onions should be optimally stored, and therefore can give the command to the sensors to change the temperature according to what is the need. This can significantly reduce what is called as food wastage and food spoilage. Another important example is the DRDO. Main example. The DRDO also won the Changemaker of the Year award for the role played in ensuring that India's defense needs are absolutely provided for. Therefore, DRDO, Defense Research and Development Organization, is producing critical defense technologies. What do you mean by critical defense technologies? If you name it, for example, submarines in underwater, any kind of land missile systems, any kind of air missile systems, space technologies, and even cyber technologies. So in all areas of defense, they are significantly innovating and increasing the self-sufficiency when it comes to defense capabilities. So these are the examples and the best practices that you can use and write in the exam. Wangchuk detained under NSA 2 days after violence in Leh. We had seen the problem associated with the violence that had erupted in Ladakh when multiple protesters were demanding the 6th schedule status, statehood, etc. for Ladakh. The climate activist who was on, Sonam Wangchuk, who was on a protest, he had to give up his protest, and certain protesters were also killed in the clashes with the police forces. A lot of property was also vandalized, places were also burned, and therefore this probably gave the center to use this as an excuse to put any form of curfew in that region. The center has also accused Sonam Wangchuk of creating a public disorder problem, has accused him of creating and instigating violence in the region of Ladakh. And therefore, because of these allegations, the National Security Act has been used to detain him and therefore take him from that region and prevent any other public order related issues. So let's understand in that context, what is the National Security Act? The National Security Act is basically giving a tool to the government or the enforcement agencies to basically handle a situation that is unprecedented in nature. That means any person, if the person is threatening national security, if the person is threatening the stability of public order or disrupting any essential supplies and services, then that person can be detained even without a formal charge for up to 12 months, that is 1 year. Those are the expansive provisions and powers given under the National Security Act of 1980. So in case a person is accused of any of these aspects, they can be detained without a formal charge being pressed for up to 12 months. Now, this is also permissible. This detention is also permissible in the restrictions or the exceptions provided under the fundamental rights. In fact, under Article 22 of the Constitution, it permits the use of preventive detention as a tool, and it therefore also says that there must be certain safeguards. Even if you have detained a person, then you cannot keep the person beyond 3 months unless you present the person in front of an advisory board that is made of relevant judges, and they will decide if this detention can be continued or not. So that is also part of the Article 22 of the Constitution. The advisory board has to review the detention after 3 months, even under the National Security Act, because it is also written in the Constitution. And therefore, after 3 months of detention, 3 High Court judges that will constitute the advisory board will review and see if there are enough evidence and reasons to continue this detention up to 12 months. The detainee can, of course, appeal before the High Court advisory panel against any judgment of the advisory board as well. So that can also be the case as well. The person can be detained up to 10 days without being informed of charges. Now, why is this different? That means in case you are normally arrested, not under the grounds of National Security Act, there is an obligation for the enforcement agencies to tell you the reasons and ground of your arrest. Yes, it is important for them to take you to the magistrate in 24 hours. But in this case, if you are detained, you can be detained up to 10 days without any formal charge or without any kind of information that is to be given to you. That means there is no mandatory obligation to immediately inform you of the charges against you. That is the power of detention under the National Security Act. And of course, this detention after being reviewed can be continued till 12 months, that is 1 year, and even can be extended further. Let's come to another article. In 2019, that means the Hindu the newspaper, has taken the minutes of a meeting, and therefore in the minutes of the meeting, it was found that the National Commission for Scheduled Tribes had taken up the matter of the tribal status of the 6th scheduled status to Ladakh suo moto. That means automatically on their own, they had taken up the matter. They had said that we do support this tribal status or 6th scheduled status to Ladakh. Other ministries also, for instance, the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, and the Ministry of Law had given their approval for the 6th scheduled status. But yet, the center said that we want to ensure development in that region before giving this kind of a status. So therefore, 6th schedule again becomes important. So what are the important provisions of the 6th schedule? We must look at that. Article 244 allows for the 6th schedule. That means certain tribal regions will be given due autonomy. Certain tribal regions will be given decentralized democratization. Certain tribal regions will be given the autonomy to manage their own affairs in certain subjects, in certain jurisdiction. The 6th schedule is presently applicable to 4 states. Those are MMAT. One is the state of Mizoram, the state of Meghalaya, the state of Assam, and the state of Tripura. It allows for creating autonomous district councils and autonomous districts. That means wherever there is a significant tribal population, the governor can organize it in the form of autonomous districts. The governor can also increase and decrease the boundaries of it. So organization, reorganization, increase and decrease of boundaries of autonomous districts is permissible. A district council is also to be created that has members who are elected by the tribals. For example, 26 elected members and 4 members nominated by the governor will constitute the district council. And this district council will have the powers to make laws on certain subjects. Which subjects? Subjects such as manage of land. That means there are concerns that land will not be given to non-tribals in that region. There will be managing and regulation of money lending. There can be laws relating to the usage of forests. There can also be, the district council can also have powers to manage the licenses for minor minerals and mining in those regions. The district councils can also run schools, dispensaries, hospitals, etc. In fact, tribals have their own customs, their own laws, their own particular aspects of governing their life. So therefore, it is also permissible in 6 scheduled areas to create what are called as village or district courts. These village and district courts will also be instrumental in resolving in dispute resolution of the disputes associated with the scheduled tribes of that region. The acts of the parliament or the act of the state legislature, either they do not apply to these regions because these regions have their own customs, or even if they apply with certain modifications. That is the power of the 6th schedule. Let's come to the last article. AFSPA extended in parts of Manipur, Arunachal and Nagaland for 6 more months. The Union Ministry has further extended the Armed Forces Special Powers Act in parts. Please remember, it says parts, not the whole state. In parts of Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh and Nagaland for 6 months. In that context, for prelims, you must understand what is AFSPA. Armed Forces Special Powers Act. As the word suggests, the act is intended to give certain special powers to the armed forces that are operating in certain disturbed areas, to give them a certain sense of immunity, to enhance their power to maintain stability in that region. Yes, that means how can AFSPA be implemented? AFSPA can be implemented or applied in a region after a disturbed area in a region has been declared. Disturbed area basically means any area where things have gotten out of hand, where it is understood that only the civilian administration is not maintaining the law and order properly. And therefore, the civilian administration will also require the aid of the armed forces to maintain law and order. So therefore, both the center, and therefore this will be a prelims question as well. Can the center and the state government both declare a disturbed area? The answer is yes. If the question says only the center can, the answer will be incorrect. So both center and the state government can issue a notification declaring an area as a disturbed area. Very, very important. Where the civilian administration has to be complemented with the armed forces to maintain the law and order, to ensure the constitutional machinery is upheld in that region. This can be due to multiple issues. For example, ethnic strife. For example, any kind of pelting of stones against the government. For example, any kind of issues associated with communal clashes, etc., etc., right? Or any insurgency operations. This disturbed area can either be the whole state or can also be just a part of the state. Once declared, this remains for the next 3 months. Once an area has been declared as disturbed area, it remains for 3 months. Here, when the armed forces come in, the moment AFSPA is applied to these areas and the armed forces have come into this area, they can prohibit the gathering of 5 or more people in order to ensure law and order is maintained, in order to ensure these individuals are not plotting for any kind of violence or disturbing the public order. These armed forces are also allowed to use force and directly open fire after giving a warning in case they see a person is violating a law of the land. It is also suspicion. Only on the basis of suspicion, they can also take up arrests without warrant. They can also, on the basis of suspicion, search any area, any premises in that area without any proper warrant. These are the expansive powers given to armed forces. And the most important power is that if we had to discuss the conduct of the armed forces, that means have they taken up any human rights violations? How have they performed? If have they done any excesses while controlling the situation? Any kind of proceedings that you want to begin against the armed forces, those proceedings cannot begin without the sanction provided by the central government. And that is a form of indirect immunity that is given to the armed forces under the AFSPA Act. That is all that you need to know from this article. So on that note, we have come to an end for today's session. I hope you are taking back something informative. If you have, make sure that you like the video, comment down below. We absolutely love to hear from you. In case you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, now is the time to do so. Please tune in back again at 7 p.m. Mukesh sir will be live with monthly current affairs video as well. On that note, allow me to sign off. Have a wonderful, wonderful day ahead. Take care. Bye-bye.